Welcome to Mr. Doom's channel for horror stories.
Help me. What you're about to hear is a story that has been pieced together from journals, frantic voicemails, and a single chilling police report from the autumn of 1998. It's a story about a young couple, Liam and Chloe, and the idyllic future they sought in the quiet heartland of Ohio. But what they found in their dream home was not peace, but a malevolent presence tied to an object of simple, dark beauty. An object that didn't just haunt their home, it unraveled their reality. Before we cross the threshold into their nightmare, if you appreciate stories that delve into the darkness that hides just beneath the surface of our world, show your support by letting the like button know you're here, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Now, turn down the lights. Let's begin. The year was 1998. The air in rural Ohio that September still clung to the golden warmth of a dying summer, a promise of the crisp, colorful autumn that was just around the corner. For Liam and Chloe, it was the season of new beginnings. They had poured every last dollar of their savings and the hefty loan from parents who were cautiously optimistic into a 2-story farmhouse that sat on 5 acres of overgrown land. The house, built in the late 1800s, was what the realtor had charitably called a fixer-upper. It had good bones, he had said, smiling a little too widely. The paint was peeling in long, sun-bleached strips, the porch steps groaned in protest under any weight, and the windows were clouded with the grime of decades. But to Liam and Chloe, it was perfect. It was a blank canvas. Liam was a carpenter by trade, his hands calloused and capable, his mind always seeing the finished product buried beneath the decay. Chloe was an artist, a painter who saw beauty in the wild, untamed fields and the way the evening light spilled across the warped wooden floors. They were young, in love, and possessed that particular brand of blissful ignorance that allows one to see a derelict farmhouse not as a money pit, but as a future. They spent the first 2 weeks in a whirlwind of activity. Days were filled with the sounds of hammers, the scrape of putty knives, and the low hum of a radio playing the hits of the decade. Evenings were for take-out pizza eaten on the floor of the half-finished living room, their bodies aching, their faces smudged with dirt and paint, their laughter echoing in the empty halls. They were exhausted, but deliriously happy. The house was slowly transforming, shedding its skin of neglect. It was becoming a home. It was during the 3rd week, while clearing out the attic, that they found it. Tucked away in the farthest, darkest corner, shrouded in a thick canvas top, yellowed with age, stood a mirror. It was enormous, at least 7 feet tall and 4 feet wide, framed in a heavy, dark wood that seemed to drink the light from the single bare bulb hanging from the rafters. The wood was intricately carved with winding vines and strange nocturnal flowers that were unlike any Chloe had ever seen. There were no markers, no signatures, just the silent, imposing craftsmanship of a bygone era. "Whoa," Liam breathed, his voice muffled by the dust. "Look at this thing." He pulled the tarp completely off and a cloud of dust motes danced in the weak light. Chloe stepped closer, her artist's eye immediately captivated. The carvings were exquisite, almost hypnotic. But the glass itself, that was another matter. It was flawless, impossibly so. For a piece that had clearly been languishing in a dusty attic for who knows how long, it held no film of grime, no cracks, no discoloration. It was a perfect, dark, liquid rectangle that reflected their dusty, startled faces with unnerving clarity. "It's beautiful," Chloe whispered, though a strange, prickling sensation traced its way up her spine. It was the kind of cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. "It's also got to weigh a ton," Liam grunted, trying to nudge it. The mirror didn't budge. "We can't just leave it up here. What do you want to do with it? Sell it?" Chloe hesitated. The thought of selling it felt wrong. It felt like it belonged to the house. "No," she said, surprising herself. Let's keep it. We could put it in the main hallway at the bottom of the stairs. It would open up the space." Liam, ever practical, just saw another heavy object to move. But he saw the look in her eyes, the genuine fascination, and he relented. "All right, but you're not helping me carry this beast. I'll get my buddy Mark to come over this weekend." Getting the mirror down from the attic was an ordeal. It took both men, sweating and swearing, to navigate the narrow attic stairs and maneuver it into the downstairs hallway. As they set it against the wall where Chloe had designated, Mark, a stout man with a cheerful, booming laugh, wiped his brow and shook his head. "Thing's a monster," he said. "Gives me the creeps, too. It's like it's watching you." He shivered theatrically. "Anyway, pizza and beer on you, right?" Once Mark had left, Chloe spent the rest of the evening cleaning the frame, polishing the already gleaming wood until it shone with a deep, rich luster. She couldn't shake the feeling Mark had described. The mirror didn't just reflect the hallway. It seemed to hold it, to possess it. The reflection was deeper, the shadows darker, the colors richer than the reality in front of it. She dismissed it as a trick of the old wavy glass, an optical illusion created by its sheer quality. But that night, the first unsettling event occurred. Liam was already asleep, snoring softly beside her. Chloe was reading when she heard a sound from downstairs, a soft scraping noise. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They were in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down a gravel road. She slipped out of bed, grabbing the heavy iron fire poker from the hearth in their bedroom. Her bare feet made no sound on the freshly sanded floorboards as she crept to the top of the stairs. She peered down into the darkness of the hallway below. Then she saw it. In the reflection of the mirror, which caught the faint moonlight from a nearby window, she saw a shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows of the living room doorway. It was tall and painfully thin, a stark black silhouette. It slid across the reflected floor and stopped directly in front of the mirror, seeming to stare right back up at her. Chloe froze, her knuckles white on the poker. She couldn't breathe. She was paralyzed by a primal, absolute terror. She squeezed her eyes shut, then forced them open again. The hallway was empty. There was nothing there, just the silent house, the pale moonlight, and the hulking shape of the mirror. She scanned every corner, every shadow. Nothing. She must have been dreaming. a waking nightmare brought on by exhaustion and stress. She tried to convince herself of that as she crawled back into bed, her body trembling. She didn't tell Liam. How could she? He'd say she was just overtired, letting her imagination get the better of her. She was the one with the artistic temperament, the dreamer. He was the one with his feet planted firmly on the ground. But things only got stranger. A few days later, Chloe was painting in the living room. She had her easel set up, and from her vantage point she had a clear view of the mirror in the hall. Out of her corner of eye, she saw a flicker of movement in its reflection. Liam's reflection, walking from the kitchen towards the front door. "Hey, where are you going?" she called out, dabbing her brush in cerulean blue. There was no answer. "Liam?" she called again, a little louder. Silence. Frowning, she put her brush down and walked into the hallway. It was empty. She checked the kitchen. Empty. She walked to the front door and looked outside. Liam's truck was gone. She suddenly remembered him saying he had to go into town for more lumber and wouldn't be back until late afternoon. A cold dread washed over her. It wasn't just a flicker she'd seen. She had seen his full reflection. The red flannel shirt he'd been wearing that morning, the way he walked with a slight limp from an old knee injury. She had seen him as clearly as if he was standing right there. But he wasn't. He hadn't been in the house for hours. When Liam got home that evening, she told him what she'd seen. He listened patiently, his brow furrowed with concern. "Honey, you've been working too hard," he said, pulling her into a hug. "This house is a huge project. You're exhausted. Your eyes are playing tricks on you." "No, Liam, it was real. I saw you," she insisted, her voice rising with a frantic edge. "How could you have seen me? I was 20 miles away," he reasoned, his tone gentle but firm. "It's just an old weird mirror." That became his explanation for everything. The strange cold spot that seemed to have permanently settled in the hallway around the mirror. The way objects would be in different places than they remembered leaving them. Always small things, a set of keys, a book, a coffee mug. But only when they'd last seen them in the mirror's reflection. Chloe started to feel a growing sense of dread, a feeling of being watched not just by the mirror, but from it. The whispers started about a month after they moved in. Faint at first, so faint you could mistake them for the sighing of the wind or the settling of the old house. Chloe would be alone, and she'd hear it. A sibilant, trailing sound, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. A whisper. She could never make out words, just the impression of a voice, ancient and dry and full of malice. She began to spend more and more time in front of the mirror. She'd stare into its depths for hours, her painting forgotten, the housework neglected. Her own reflections started to look strange to her, distorted. There were days she looked older, her face etched with lines of worry she didn't have. On other days, a strange, cruel smile would seem to flicker at the corners of her reflected mouth. Liam would come home to find her standing there, motionless, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Chloe, this is getting out of hand," he'd say, his frustration mounting. "It's a piece of furniture. It's not real." "You don't see what it shows me," she'd reply, her voice a monotone. "You don't see what it shows me." Their arguments became more frequent, more vicious. The house that was supposed to be their shared dream was becoming a battleground. Liam started to resent the mirror, to hate it. He saw it as the source of the wedge being driven between them. Chloe, on the other hand, was becoming more protective, almost reverent of it. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in late October. Liam was in the workshop, trying to tune out the tension in the house by sanding a set of kitchen cabinets. Chloe had been quiet all evening, which she had learned was more unsettling than her talking about the mirror. He finally came inside around 10 p.m., covered in sawdust, and found the house eerily silent. "Chloe?" he called out. No answer. He walked into the hallway and found her standing before the mirror. But she wasn't just looking at it. She had her hands pressed flat against the cold glass, her head bowed as if in prayer. The air around her was freezing, and Liam could see his own breath fogging in the air. "Chloe, what are you doing? Get away from that thing," he yelled, his fear finally boiling over into anger. She turned to look at him, and his blood ran cold. It was her face, but it was utterly, terrifyingly wrong. Her eyes were wide and vacant, but behind the vacancy was something ancient and intelligent and utterly devoid of humanity. Her mouth was stretched into a thin, tight smile. And then she spoke, but the voice that came out was not her own. It was a chorus of voices, a layered, rasping sound that seemed to scrape the inside of his skull. "We are one now," it said, the voice both a whisper and a scream. Liam didn't think, he acted. He lunged forward, grabbed Chloe by the arms, and ripped her away from the mirror. She felt impossibly light, like a doll. As soon as her hands left the glass, her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Liam knelt beside her, his heart threatening to explode from his chest. He checked her pulse. It was there, faint but steady. He looked from her pale, still face up at the mirror, and in its reflection he saw himself kneeling on the floor, holding Chloe. But standing behind his reflection was the figure, that tall, slim shadow he had only heard Chloe describe. It had no face, just a suggestion of one, a smudge of deeper darkness. It lifted a long skeletal hand and pointed directly at him. Liam heard the voice in his own mind, a sibilant, cold hiss that coiled round his thoughts. "You are next." A primal rage, born of sheer terror, erupted in Liam. He scrambled to his feet, leaving Chloe on the floor, and ran to the fireplace. He grabbed the heaviest iron poker, and with a guttural roar, he charged at the mirror. "Get out of my house!" he screamed. He swung the poker with all his might. The moment the iron made contact with the glass, two things happened at once. The mirror didn't just shatter, it exploded. A deafening sonic boom, like a lightning strike inside the house, threw Liam backwards. Shards of glass, both large and small, erupted outwards with impossible force, peppering the walls, the floor, the ceiling. The second thing was the scream. It wasn't human. It was a high, keening shriek of rage and pain that seemed to come from the very fabric of the house itself, a sound that vibrated in Liam's bones and made his teeth ache, a long scream that finally faded into a ringing silence. Liam lay on the floor, dazed, his ears ringing. A shard of glass had sliced his cheek open, and he could feel warm blood trickling down his neck. He pushed himself up. The hallway was a disaster zone. The beautiful, terrifying mirror was gone. In its place was just a splintered, empty frame hanging askew on the wall. Chloe began to stir, groaning. "Liam, what happened?" He rushed to her side, helping her sit up. Her eyes were clear again. It was her, his Chloe. The vacant, horrifying presence was gone. "I broke it," he said, his voice trembling. I think it's gone." They didn't sleep that night. They huddled together on the living room sofa, wrapped in a blanket, until the first gray light of dawn broke the horizon. They didn't talk. There were no words for what had happened. With the morning light came a decision, unspoken but absolute. They had to leave. The dream was over. The house was poisoned. They packed in a frantic, silent rush, throwing clothes and essentials into boxes and bags. They didn't bother with the furniture. They just wanted to be gone. Liam was taping up the last box when he noticed it. There was a single large shard of the mirror lying near the baseboard, a piece they had missed in the dim light of the previous night. It was about the size of his hand. He bent down to pick it up, to throw it out with the rest of the debris. But as he looked into its small, reflective surface, he didn't see himself. He saw the hallway, not the real hallway behind him, which was filled with boxes and the signs of their hasty departure, but the hallway as it had been, clean, empty, pristine. And standing in the middle of the reflected hallway was Chloe. She was smiling at him, but it wasn't her warm, loving smile. It was the thin, cruel smile from the night before, the smile of the thing in the mirror. She raised her hand and beckoned to him, her eyes gleaming with the cold, possessive light. Liam dropped the shard as if it were burning hot. It clattered to the floor. He stumbled backwards, his heart pounding. He looked at the real Chloe, who was standing by the door, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She looked normal. It was his Chloe, wasn't it?
"Liam, are you okay?"
she asked, her voice laced with concern.
"You look like you've seen a ghost."
He forced a smile, but it felt like a grimace. "I'm fine, just tired. Let's go." He didn't touch the last shard of the mirror. He left it there on the floor, a tiny dark eye in the abandoned house. They got in their truck and drove away, not once looking back. They never returned. The bank foreclosed on the property a few months later. The official story ends there. A young couple, overwhelmed by a renovation project, walks away from their home. But that's not the real ending. The police report filed 6 months later from a small town in Oregon, over 2,000 miles away, tells a different story. It details a wellness check on a man named Liam, called in by his concerned parents who hadn't heard from him in weeks. Officers entered his small, sparsely furnished apartment to find him dead. He had been dead for some time. The coroner listed the cause of death as a severe self-inflicted wound. But the responding officer, a veteran named Sergeant Miller, noted something strange in his report. He wrote that the entire apartment was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, small compact mirrors, large bathroom mirrors, decorative wall mirrors. Every single one of them had been methodically, violently shattered. All except one. On the wall opposite the man's body hung a single, unbroken piece of glass, roughly the size of a man's hand, set in a crude, handmade wooden frame. And in his final, chilling addendum to the report, Sergeant Miller wrote, "The strangest thing was the victim's girlfriend. We found her in the bedroom. She was just sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't even look at us. She just sat there and smiled." So what really happened in that house in Ohio? Did Liam destroy the entity, or did he just break its window to the world, letting it escape? Was it Chloe who was possessed all along, or did a piece of that darkness latch on to Liam, driving him to madness and despair? And the most terrifying question of all, if a tiny shard of that mirror held so much power, what became of the hundreds of other pieces scattered in the dust of that abandoned farmhouse? Let me know your theories in the comments below. What do you think was smiling back at Liam from Chloe's eyes?
Liam dropped the shard as if it were burning hot. It clattered to the floor. He stumbled backwards, his heart pounding. He looked at the real Chloe, who was standing by the door, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She looked normal. It was his Chloe, wasn't it?
Liam, are you okay?
She asked, her voice laced with concern.
You look like you've seen a ghost.
He forced a smile, but it felt like a grimace. I'm fine, just tired. Let's go. He didn't touch the last shard of the mirror. He left it there on the floor, a tiny dark eye in the abandoned house. They got in their truck and drove away, not once looking back. They never returned. The bank foreclosed on the property a few months later. The official story ends there. A young couple, overwhelmed by a renovation project, walks away from their home. But that's not the real ending. The police report filed 6 months later from a small town in Oregon, over 2,000 miles away, tells a different story. It details a wellness check on a man named Liam, called in by his concerned parents who hadn't heard from him in weeks. Officers entered his small, sparsely furnished apartment to find him dead. He had been dead for some time. The coroner listed the cause of death as a severe self-inflicted wound. But the responding officer, a veteran named Sergeant Miller, noted something strange in his report. He wrote that the entire apartment was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, small compact mirrors, large bathroom mirrors, decorative wall mirrors. Every single one of them had been methodically, violently shattered. All except one. On the wall opposite the man's body hung a single, unbroken piece of glass, roughly the size of a man's hand, set in a crude, handmade wooden frame. And in his final, chilling addendum to the report, Sergeant Miller wrote, "The strangest thing was the victim's girlfriend. We found her in the bedroom. She was just sitting on the bed, staring at the wall.
She wouldn't speak. She wouldn't even look at us. She just sat there and smiled. So what really happened in that house in Ohio? Did Liam destroy the entity, or did he just break its window to the world, letting it escape? Was it Chloe who was possessed all along, or did a piece of that darkness latch on to Liam, driving him to madness and despair? And the most terrifying question of all, if a tiny shard of that mirror held so much power, what became of the hundreds of other pieces scattered in the dust of that abandoned farmhouse? Let me know your theories in the comments below. What do you think was smiling back at Liam from Chloe's eyes?